Cairngorms National Park is a really important and special place for wildlife, and the National Park Authority have brought beavers back to the Cairngorms after they've been missing for nearly 400 years. And they're back to help us in our fight against climate change and biodiversity loss. Alongside our large-scale catchment restoration work, beavers will help us restore freshwater environments, kickstarting ecological processes and function. After extensive engagement work with communities, landowners and businesses, we've secured a licence from Nature Scott. Our licence is for the first wild release of beavers into a new catchment in Scotland. It's for 5 years, for up to 50 beavers into the Upper Spey catchment. And we're delighted that Insh Marshes is one of the first 3 sites to receive beavers in the Cairngorms, and it's great to be working with the RSPB and other delivery partners on this exciting project. Whilst we know that beavers are going to bring lots of benefits, we also acknowledge that in some locations there are going to be challenges and impacts. That's why we've got a dedicated beaver officer to help people live and work alongside beavers in the national park. For more information about the project, check out our social media channels and website.
I think as humans we have a responsibility to think about that. If humans caused a disappearance of a species, we want to think about whether that would be useful for an area to get the species back. Whether it's a native species or not, sometimes that's ambiguous, but I think that's actually a bit off the point. I think if we think bringing a species back is useful for an ecosystem, then we should really consider that. And obviously there's a lot to think about when you do that. There's a lot of responsibility to make sure that that happens in a correct way. And that's why there's international guidelines to do that. But definitely it's an exciting thing to bring back ecosystem functions and back into an ecosystem, so that you have to manage them less as people, so less disturbance in those areas than if those functions are back into the system. So that's why I think certain species reintroductions are really important actually going forward for nature conservation, to keep it sustainable and with long-term visions as well. So a really, really important tool, I think, for conservation. Yeah, so beavers on Insh Marshes can play a really important role for the reserve. So we pride ourselves for being a reserve with dynamic systems, dynamic habitats. They don't stay the same, they're in transition. And the beaver has the capacity to really bring that to the next level, really. Create new habitats, just constantly change the environment slightly so that there's new habitats for colonizing species, and other areas that are allowed to succeed back to like climate vegetations as well. So it's that management, rotation management that beavers have in their ecology is so useful for nature, that brings that biodiversity back. In particular, I can give you a few examples of things that really will make a difference. So our floodplains, they are flat at the moment, and there are some ponds in there and some areas with more shrub and some with less. So beaver will impact those areas differently through space and time, and they'll make short, small runnels into the floodplain, get to those small compartments of woodland sometimes, which creates some really nice, narrow but deeper ditches that we don't have at the reserve at the moment, which are good for watervole, for example. The edges of our woodlands on the floodplain, they are now all regenerating because we do deer control. We try to get more trees coming up, but those trees at some point we constantly want regeneration on the reserve. So if we just allow all the trees to become mature, then those younger stages of trees that are also important for lots of invertebrates on the reserve, they won't be here forever. And with bringing a beaver in, you allow that constant succession to happen, and all those different stages will be present at all times. And that's really what beavers bring to us. Which if we didn't have beavers, we would have to do it to really boost our biodiversity on the reserve. So the edges of woodlands and wetlands, that's a key thing. And then the floodplain dynamics themselves as well, they create temporary ponds, permanent ponds, those runnels that I mentioned before. Those are like quite specific examples. A key part for having beavers back not only on the reserve but back in this landscape and in Scotland, I think for me it's super important that people start having a mind shift toward nature, and beavers can play a very big role in that because it brings nature closer. For people who love it already, it's something amazing to experience, to see a beaver and to see a landscape change. And other people, it forces to think about it a bit more because they obviously can have a big impact on land use. And I think that's a good thing. I think that the more people who are thinking about, okay, how can I live and work and make an income with nature, the more interest there will be as well, and the better it'll be done. And I think that's one of the key things in conservation that still needs to improve, is like really thinking about how our society sits together with nature, the nature that we want in the future, the nature that's climate resilient, the nature that provides us things, and that we really value those things as a society as well. Things like more fire resistant forests in the future. Beaver can help with that. Things like climate, actually fighting climate change, so like sequestering more carbon, thinking again about, okay, which of our habitats that we provide for us are also sequestering carbon. So that could be permanent grasslands are very good at that, but wetlands are definitely one of those habitats that beavers bring back and have that potential to really sequester carbon as well, more than drier ground can do sometimes, depending on the context. So that's, for me, that's the most exciting thing about the beavers coming back, not only on the reserve, but in Scotland, really, and really making big changes for both in people's minds and people's relationship with nature, as in really tackling these big challenges that we have at the moment with our climate and our environment. So, yeah, good news.